Well, I'm excited. We've got Makia Freeman back. Hey, good to see you, Makia. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for having me on again.
Author, researcher. You're always writing books about the sort of stuff that I'm into, and so I'm excited to get into this one. Your newest book that you haven't even released yet. You're still working on it, and maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit on it, but I just think there's never been a more important time for the general public to wake up to what's actually happening here and to learn your history. Boy, I mean, I feel like I went through school for I don't know how many years, passed my history tests, got into the real world and had this epiphany that I need to forget everything that I thought I knew about our history, relearn it, the truth about it. And over the years, it's taken me down some rabbit holes and some dark paths towards what was happening, not just in our recent history, or not just in American history, but world history, and what was going on a couple hundred years ago. And you might be tempted to go, oh, well, that's a couple hundred years ago. Who cares about that? That's irrelevant to us. Well, I've got news for you, man. These things are extremely important, and they're starting to pop their heads up again. And I think to the extent that we understand our past, we might be able to figure out where we're going in the future. What was happening in Europe a couple hundred years ago? It seems like there was a decision that was made, or some groups got together and connected up and had a plan for world domination and control through the banking systems and everything that comes with that. Can we talk a little bit about maybe like the origin story of the Rothschilds and where they really came from, and who their partners were, and why they're so powerful, and why we're still talking about them 300 years later?
Absolutely. Yeah. And for some people, history is a bit of a boring thing. I mean, for me, I was always kind of interested in it, even just the mainstream version of it that we get in high school. But I really like the Irish researcher Michael Tessarion, because I'm going to paraphrase him. He said something like, history as it's taught is kind of can be one of the most boring subjects. But when you look at actually the way that history has been manipulated, or like the real way that history actually unfold, well, the conspiracy that's really behind it all, that is one of the most fascinating subjects of all. And yeah, I mean, we all learned the dates about this is when World War One started, or this is when World War Two started, and things like that. And yeah, sure, that's important, but we're never taught actually who really caused these events. Why did they happen? What was the real point of them? That kind of thing is absolutely fascinating, because when you understand that, you realize that there's no reason why these bloodlines and this cult and these same people couldn't be doing the same thing again today. Why wouldn't they be? If they already did it in the past and it works so well, why wouldn't they be doing the same thing today with maybe slightly different actors or different countries, but the same pattern? It's going to be repeating itself now, and then that gives you a real glimpse into, okay, now I understand what's actually happening right now. But yeah, I mean, I think a key time in the history of humanity was in this era, in the mid 1700s, because this is when the Rothschilds came to power. Now, there was already a lot of there were groups that had understood the art of banking, and basically the art of money creation, and how powerful that could be. But most people didn't understand that yet. And to sum that up in a nutshell, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your viewers and listeners are familiar with this, but basically the whole system is based on fraud. It is based on banks issuing money but not having enough real money to cover it. That was when we were on the gold standard. And so they're just always hoping that not everyone is going to go and cash in their notes for gold or silver at the same time, because that's called a bank run, and that collapses the whole thing. They don't have enough to cover it. But then when they started removing gold and silver from as a standard, and it's just fiat money, it's just paper currency, then they don't even really have to worry about that kind of bank run. But they still have to worry about the whole system kind of collapsing, because they're issuing way more money than what they have on their books, and that's how money gets created. And anyway, the power to do that is so immense that you don't have to really you can have complete control of society just by having that power to create currency. And so the Rothschilds understood that, and they weren't the only banking family around, but for whatever reason, the head of the dynasty, who was called Mayer Amschel Rothschild, he was born in Frankfurt. He rose to prominence. He started lending money to governments, to kings. Like, he realized that this was the way to do it. Then he sent his five sons out to the five different important powerful cities in Europe, where they set up their own banks there and did the same thing. And it didn't take long, just a generation or two, before they were so powerful that they were basically ruling an entire continent. So this by around the time of maybe the early 1800s, they were already so powerful that they could tell countries and kings and whatever what to do. But what's very interesting is that there was also a cult that had developed in within Judaism, and there were two men that were basically responsible for this, and they were both proclaiming themselves Messiah. And the first one was a guy called Sabbatai Zevi, and he was born in Turkey, and he basically proclaimed himself to be the Messiah, and he had some supporters. He in fact at one point it's written that he had up to 1 million supporters, which is quite incredible because that was apparently half the number of Jews in the world at the time.
Wow.
So that's really an incredible number at that time, and this was in the 1600s. And funnily enough, he declared himself Messiah in 1666. Now he was coming from a strain of Judaism which studied the Kabbalah. I know there's a lot of holy books within Judaism. There's the Torah, there's the Talmud. The Kabbalah is very much into occult stuff, especially gematria, which is the study of numbers and the significance they hold, and using the symbolism and significance of numbers to do certain things. So he was into that, and he had people that really believed in him, but he was walking around, and at that point the whole area of Palestine was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. This is before modern day Turkey. And so the Sultan at the time eventually confronted him and didn't really like what he was doing. And he gave him a choice. He said, either you convert to Islam or you die. And so he converted to Islam. And somehow, even though he had all these Jewish followers and adherents, he had a lot of people that really believed in him. And I guess you could call them, they were kind of like his PR doctors. And so they spun that as though it was some kind of good thing and it was necessary. And the Messiah was doing this for some reason to, that they were able to spin it. And so he lost some supporters, but he actually still managed to retain some supporters. And so that started a whole thing that continues to this day of the Jewish people, a certain amount of Jewish people professing to be a certain faith on the outside, but really being something else on the inside. And in Turkey, there's a Turkish word dönme, which means to turn, and that comes from what Sabbatai Zevi did, because he turned towards Islam, but secretly he still retained his Judaistic faith. And so he was like very much, he advocated that because he was the Messiah, all the normal rules that applied didn't apply anymore because it was the Messianic age, and therefore everything could be reversed. So what was normally forbidden was now allowed. What was normally immoral was now not only moral but encouraged. And so he would feast on days when there were famines, and but he was getting into things like sexual orgies and other things like totally outside the bounds of kind of strict morality of mainstream religions. So. And he was also a believer that the land of Palestine, there was something holy about that, and it belongs to the Jews and all of this. So some of this can be traced back to him. So he was a very interesting character, but the guy that came after him was a complete psychopath, and that guy was called Jacob Frank, and he was from Poland originally, but he claimed that he was the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. So he basically got a lot of these Dönme Jews from Turkey and a lot of the Sabbateans, and basically continued the cults, and it became Sabbatean Frankism. And he was demonic. I mean, he would do things like rape his own daughter. He would pimp his own daughter out to attract more people. I mean, they were into torture, animal sacrifice, full-on Satanism. And so he was kicked out of a lot of places as he traveled around. But as luck would have it or not, he ended up in Germany, where he made the acquaintance of Rothschild just as the Rothschilds were rising. And so then we had this diabolical kind of connection where the Rothschilds were becoming very powerful, and they had all this money, so they could fund all these different organizations and whatever, linking up with this Satanist who was starting this continuing this cult of Sabbatean Frankism, and it became like an unholy alliance. This was also around the time when the Rothschilds realized that Well, they started getting very, very ambitious and wanting to overtake the world. And so one of the ways that they did that was they wanted to take down aristocracies and monarchies, and they also wanted to take down the church and religion because they were the power centers of society at the time. They wanted to create a new power center where it was basically on money, on capital, and so they had to attack these kind of powers of society that were inherent at the time. So they created the original Illuminati, the Order of the Illuminati, on May 1st, 1776, with Adam Weishaupt, who was also a crypto Jew. So this was the period where these crypto Jews started infiltrating all these organizations. And so a lot of people who study this actually say that Freemasonry wasn't always bad, and that there was a lot of good to it and whatever, because it was based on fraternity and friendship and all of this stuff. I mean, I don't know about that claim, but there might be some truth to it, because it does appear that the Freemasons were already an established secret society, but it didn't take long for the Illuminati to infiltrate them and then advance all the way to the top. And then pretty soon they had control of the Freemasons, right? And the Freemasons had branches everywhere. And so then the Freemasons were just being run by the Illuminati. And then they were using it for their own purposes. And this whole way that they did this infiltration it's like their key signature style. This is how this cult operates. They look at some organization or government or the monarchy or the church or secret societies, and they get their agents in there, and then they patiently wait for their agents to advance to the top, and then they overtake the whole society, and then they start bringing in their own agents once they have the power to appoint new people or bring new people in. This is how they do it. And when you look at the U.S. government and it's Israeli agents, when you look at, yeah, there's so many examples of this now of how the world is run, and a lot of it is you can understand by studying this period of history around between 1750 and 1800 of what was happening in Europe.
Wow. First time I ever heard of Sabbatean Frankism was David Icke's book, The Trigger, that I read in 2019. And before that, you hear of the Rothschilds, you understand the game, Five Sons. They sent them out to start these banking houses in different countries. And it all makes sense. And you think, well, maybe it's just about making money, and maybe it's about control through creating fiat and lending it into existence and getting people enslaved. But you always kind of want, or at least I always kind of wondered, well, what's the spiritual side of this? I mean, is it the god of money? Have they just created, made this money instead of it being the church or it being the state? It's now the bank running it. And is that enough? But to find out that there is a religious component to it as well that sort of drives this philosophy, that to me was something that I had just always assumed that their religion was money, and that maybe they were Jewish, but that was a shield, a red shield, but a shield to deflect criticism, and that maybe they would use that. But really, it was all about business. And then you start to find out about these other guys that come in, the Jacob Frank and the Order of the Illuminati, and how that ties in. And so you go, okay, it's not just banking. There's something more to it as well. Is that how it worked? Is that were they trying to position the banks as, I mean, I'd say they've done a good job here in the United States of making people slaves to the money as opposed to being slaves to other things. But it was that the plan back then, a couple hundred years ago? Let's prioritize banking and use that as the Trojan horse to get ourselves into every single society around this planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know exactly how it evolved, but I think at some point they realized, we can absolutely control the currency of society, the energetic circuit of society with the control of money. And when they realized they had that power, there was probably nothing stopping them from realizing, well, wait a minute, what's stopping us from setting up a bank in every single country in the world and basically becoming the rulers of the world? Like, we could have unlimited power over everyone. And then you combine that with the satanic element where, David Icke's gone into this in many of his books. My last book is called The International Satanic Network Exposed. We talk about how in these satanic rituals, people are putting themselves in these altered states, where the veil is thinner, where they're able to expand their perception a little, and they're making contact with entities that normally you can't see, that are normally outside the realm of ordinary perception. And some of these entities are very evil, the ones that they're connecting with. And they are basically, some people call them archons. Sometimes they appear in a reptilian form. They are basically energetic vampires. They are harvesting the energy from the humans here. There's some kind of deep dark deal that's made where they open themselves up to these entities and they think they're getting more power from them, and in return they're basically becoming like vessels for this demonic force to perpetuate like horrible evils in the world.
And it's still going on to this day, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you wonder what the initiation ritual is. You see the black eye, the people with the black eye. You hear about the parasites that they attach to their eyes, and are we? I mean, I know it's tempting to be dismissive of this and go, oh, you guys this is crazy, like talking about interdimensional energy vampires and things like that. I get it. Yeah, I agree. It sounds crazy the first time you hear it, but then you start to see this over and over again. You start to find it in their artwork everywhere. A lot of reptile symbology. I remember I was talking to Sam Tripoli about this a couple days ago, and we were together, and I said that I was on a double-decker bus in London doing one of those tours, the touristy things. And I was up on the top part, and I wasn't listening. There's a headset you can plug in, and you can kind of get the guided tour. I didn't have that in. I had just gotten off a plane. I was really tired, kind of half asleep. But I could tell when we got into not London, but because we were already in London, but the city of London, as you and I know, the 1 square mile city state in London. And the reason why I could tell I was in there without hearing it over the narration was because I noticed that all of the sculptures and art that I was seeing was all dragon related.
Yeah.
I just kept saying, there's a dragon there, and then I bumped my wife. I go, did he say that we're in city of London? She's like, yeah, what is the city of London? I'm like, it's a long story. So the lizard, and I know David takes heat for this, talking about lizard people and all that stuff, and it's turned into a nice punchline, but the truth is that there is something outside of our visible light spectrum, this perceived reality that we have, that these people seem to have made some kind of arrangement or deal with. Is it that we are being served up and harvested for our loosh, our life force, our energy, in exchange for power? I mean, I wonder what it is. I wonder if anyone has figured out what it is exactly that they get from these entities in exchange for allowing them into our world.
I think some of it is just they become they start to derive pleasure from sadistic things. So they start to get off on like the torture, the rape, the cannibalism, all the stuff that goes on to these satanic rituals. And David's done a lot of work on the bloodlines, the reptilian bloodlines that are the same as the banking families, and then they're in positions of power. They own all these major corporations, so they can basically set you up. They can make a career out of you if you agree to kind of toe the line for them. And so a lot of people are attracted to the fame, the money, the earthly power. Of course, all of that can be removed in an instant if you cross them, but that's they can get people on board with that as well. A lot of it happens when you have people from these intergenerational satanic families, a lot of the military families, where they take kids at a young age and they already start, introducing them into these rituals. They mind control them, they torture them, and they kind of groom them to become the next perpetrators of this system, and this network. But I mean, what's been eye-opening for me in writing this current book I'm still working on, but I mean, just the deeper and deeper I go into this is that when I started researching all this, I've been doing this full time for 18 years. At the start, I thought, okay, so there's the Jesuits, there's the Jews, there's the Satanists, there's all these different groups, and it can be kind of confusing because you get little bits and pieces here and there. But the deeper and deeper I go with this, I realize actually no, it's one group. These are all just manifestations of its control and of its power. It's actually one group because you see, wait, the bankers are connected with the crypto Jews who are connected with the Satanists, and they've infiltrated the Freemasons. They've infiltrated governments. Oh, wait, they're the ones that set up Israel. Oh, it's actually one group at the very top. It's one small group, but they have their tentacles in like everything, anything of importance. They've realized again the power societies of the power centers of society, and they've realized how to take control of them and infiltrate them. And so it all leads back, but it takes a while to understand that. I mean, it's for me, it's a deepening process. I'm still understanding exactly how it's all connected, and it is staggering to me, even with all the research I've done. Wow, there's really just one group behind all of this, and they've been able to create all these front companies and organizations and secret societies, and it appears like there's all these different groups competing for power. No, it's not actually like that. It's one group.
That's the thing is that the further down this rabbit hole you go, boy, you get to a point where you start thinking, I mean, I was wrong about a lot of stuff. I thought it was them, or I thought it was this group, or maybe they had an arrangement together. But when you find out that it's much deeper than that, and it's tempting to think that this is all surface level human beings working together to elevate their status or to get a monopoly on the banking system, and of course people seek to do that for sure. And it's easy to be dismissive of this non-human component of this because when you go there you automatically get branded as, okay, here we go, you're going to talk about the reptiles, or you're going to talk about something else, or you're going to talk about demonic possessions, or however you want to frame it. But I think we do ourselves a disservice if we're dismissive of this, because whether or not you or I believe in it, and I think we probably both do, but even if we didn't, it doesn't matter. They believe in it. Right. So if it's important to them and they have built their lives around this, these rituals that matter, keeping the bloodlines clean, you think, oh, who cares? I mean, you marry who you love. No, not according to these people. This is business and it's self-preservation. And the more I've looked into it, I feel the same way as you. It's like I start to think, boy, you can be dismissive of the non-human component of this if you'd like, but you do so at your own peril. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than what we're told, right? About these guys.
At this point, we have so many witnesses that have, and I'm not even just talking about researchers who've studied this area, but I mean actual survivors of the satanic rituals who've come out. They've managed to break free of the satanic network. I mean, and their stories are just incredible. And I mean, there's new ones coming out all the time. After I wrote my book, well, then I learned of some other people, and I thought, well, that could have been in my book. This person's testimony could have been in my book. They're basically saying the same thing of how they got brought into this network. What are the kind of things that go on? I mean, the South African woman Juliet Bryant, she's amazing.
Yep.
A lot of people have seen her clips, but she's been talking about how she woke up once in fright and shock, and she was on some kind of table, it seemed like an operating lab kind of table, and in New Mexico at Epstein's Zorro Ranch, right? And she was wondering, what the hell are they doing to me? Are they like taking my eggs? Are they, and she heard Epstein talking about how he wanted to seed something like 700 or 900 or 1,000 women, and
Right.
so there's all that kind of component of like the eugenics and it links into the transhumanism. And then she talks about how she saw Epstein take on the form of a reptile just for a second, right at the point of orgasm. And then he switched back. And so, of course, the victims that see these kind of things, they doubt themselves, but they also go, well, wait a minute, I did see that. That was something that happened. And I learned that after I published my book, but it was very interesting because it confirms what I'm saying, confirms what David Icke's saying. When you have these entities and people, they whip themselves up into this frenzy and they get into this state of not ordinary reality, call it, like altered perception. That's when suddenly everything that we think is our normal reality starts to shift a bit, and we start to be able to see more things. And so, at the height of orgasm, that is a very extreme state of being compared to our normal state of being. So it's interesting to me that that's when she observed
Yeah.
Epstein shift form just for a second or two.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's so much evidence. I could go on and on, but yeah, there's obviously something there if people are open-minded enough to look into it.
Have you heard Billy Corgan talk about his experiences from Smashing Pumpkins with talking about with Howard Stern?
Actually, I haven't. What did Billy
He
Corgan say?
well he wouldn't talk about the whole thing, but the first time I heard him talk about it was on Howard Stern, and he said that he saw somebody shapeshift, and that he couldn't explain, he couldn't reconcile it. He saw it, and that he didn't have an explanation for what he saw, and the person wanted him to see it and was almost kind of like giving him a wink, like, this is who I am, this is what I am. So I was curious about that. I have seen interviews that he's done after the fact, after that, talking about how it happened to him on more than one occasion with the same person, and he wasn't giving it away, but based on what he when he elaborated a little bit more, I was led to believe that it was a woman doing it, because I think it happened when he was in bed with
Wow.
with someone. And so if that holds up, that Epstein was shapeshifting during an orgasmic state, and that if Billy Corrigan in this scenario that he's talking about, and he's protective about talking about it, but he's been fairly consistent, maybe that was happening with this woman in a similar situation, and he saw something that he couldn't explain. I mean, my immediately my brain goes to, oh, it's probably Courtney Love. You know what I mean? It's probably
Well, she was
some
in Epstein's black book, so who knows?
yeah, dangerous intelligence asset there too. So I think that it's there's a we've heard about this in the modern world about this shape shifting. You see it in the artwork and sculptures. A lot of you go, boy, you guys really are obsessed with lizards here, aren't you? And I saw it in the Tower of London when I was there too during that trip, because I was focusing in on all the art and all the symbology. I saw a big coat of armor, and right on the top of the helmet was a lizard that was I mean, very well done, and it's obviously behind this protective glass. I look at it, I'm going, of all the things you could have put on there, I mean, you could have put a horn, or you could have put antlers, or it was something scary. You put a lizard on the top of your knight's helmet, your suit of armor. You have a lizard. Very weird to me, but um, I think that there's something to this. I think that there's a world beyond our eyes, and that these people seem to be beholden to it in some way. What do we make of blue bloods? We hear that term a lot with aristocracy, and I know that it's to the normies out there, they think, oh, it just means like royals marrying other royals, and but I think, boy, there might be a little something more to it. Are they working with different, maybe not physically, not colored blue blood, but are they working with a different sort of anatomy, a different type of blood? Are these the O negative or bloodlines? I mean, what is this stuff?
Possibly. I mean, there's a researcher called Stuart Swerdlow, and he was involved with the Montauk Project. He used to say that the reason they were called blue bloods was because they had a higher copper content in their blood, and copper turns blue.
Mm.
And it could be, and there could be some physiological explanation behind this. A higher amount of reptilian DNA. I don't know. But David Icke has said that basically the reason that these families intermarry so religiously, it's not because of snobbishness, although that's a nice reason. That's their PR reason. It's because they're trying to, work out the exact eugenics and genetics of it to keep it pure. And who knows? This also goes into these kind of, we see it a lot in science fiction movies, these kind of cultish obsessions of like, let's create the Messiah, let's create the chosen one, let's create the perfect vessel for this or that, and then they try to like study the whole genetics of like the entire family tree. And if this person marries this person and then they have the kid with this person, well, then we're going to create someone with this kind of like they're into all of that stuff. I mean, that's not science fiction for them. That's a science. And
No.
um, um, I mean, it's the whole thing just goes so deep. It's such a rabbit hole.
I've been working on a lot of eugenics as a topic. I've been writing about this and working on this. And you go back to you don't even have to go back all that far. Early or late late 1800s. You start to get into Darwin and this whole group comes out of the UK. All the uh, round, the Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table and all these people. They all sort of have this um, trying to use science as the justification for thinning the herd for eugenics and saying, well, we have to prune the trees and pull the human weeds. As they talk about people like that, and talking about how they need to remove a huge segment from society under the guise of improving the stock, like the way you would manage a farm, or maybe a human farm in this case. And they all, there's some weird components to it. I noticed a lot of them were homosexuals that weren't reproducing themselves, but were very much determined to thin out the herd here on Earth. And as that concept of eugenics took hold, it wound up hitting some public relations barricades in the 60s with, eugenics is such a nasty name because it's got all this baggage of 100+ years of murder. So let's rename it transhumanism. Let's rebrand and give it this new spin. And now here we are in our modern day, and we have the World Economic Forum talking about the fourth industrial revolution, the blending of man and machine into transhumanism. And I think the general public thinks, wow, that's amazing what technology can do. Yeah, you lose your leg in a car accident, but we can give you a robotic leg. And isn't that great? Now isn't this the benefit of transhumanism? And you go, well, hang on a second, guys. I don't think this isn't like we're creating cyborg half people here. I think when we dig into it, unfortunately, the term eugenics has a much darker meaning. Have you found that the one of the threads that runs through this entire sort of ideology is depopulation?
Yeah, and eugenics is actually what's behind the whole hijacked environmental movement, the green movement.
Yeah,
And at first glance, people may say, "What are you talking about? What is the possible connection between eugenics and environmentalism or saving the planet?" Well, actually, when you look at some of the founding organizations and documents that are pushing this whole hoax of man-made climate change, man-made global warming, all the stuff they've been doing, it comes out of, say, documents like the Club of Rome, organizations like the Club of Rome, and they're talking about how the only way that we're going to be able to create a world government is to get people behind a global threat, and we're going to have to say that humanity itself is the problem, and that way, people will start blaming themselves. So we will encourage this kind of self-hatred. That'll help us with depopulation, and that'll also help us with getting people scared of themselves and electing us as the saviors in a world government so that we can protect humanity from itself. And this is really sad when you see the extreme to which they've been able to push this propaganda on people, and you have all these young people, young women coming out and saying, "Well, I don't want to have kids. Like, I don't want to bring them up into this world. I think it's going to help. I'm going to help save the planet more if I don't have kids."
right.
And so when they have people saying that, they've achieved their propagandistic goals. That's what they wanted. Then they don't have to forcibly sterilize or create infertility, which they're also doing, of course. But
Of course.
if they get people willingly to say that, that's perfect, because
Yeah.
they want a smaller number of people, not because they care about the planet. They don't. They just want the right size of people to manage on the human farm. Too many people it creates too much chaos and unpredictability, and it means that they could be toppled. There could be a revolution. But this is why they erected the Georgia Guidestones, which I know have now been blown up. But they did say maintain humanity under 500 million. So they probably worked out with all their supercomputers and their algorithms, if we have 500 million people, that'll be enough people to do all the work for us.
Right.
But, hopefully not revolt. Hopefully, like with that kind of number, we can manage them. We can make sure that there's no rebellion. Um, 8 billion's a lot above that, so they're probably kind of worried that things may get out of control. So, but yeah, I mean, depopulation's been around a long time. You can look at the National Security Memorandum by Kissinger in 1974 and SSM 200. He talks about it. Depopulation should be the highest priority of the US towards all these third world countries. And I mean, it stems from this kind of superiority that they have. They feel like they're inherently superior. They have the right to rule, and this psychopathic mentality of like, well, if you're not part of our group, then you're just basically there to be used, there to be exploited. You're expendable, and we're going to depopulate you because this is the kind of plan we want, where we're rulers and the rest of you are slaves, and this is the kind of number of people we want. So it's as simple as that. Like the rest of you have to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely like completely bonkers. But this is the mindset. This is the mentality that's running the world.
Yeah, and I got a nice shock when I looked into the World Wildlife Fund, the WWF, the original WWF, not the Wrestling Federation, but the panda logo. Hey, we're just saving pandas, don't you know? We're just out here saving the world. And you go, "Oh, that sounds good. You can donate money every month to the World Wildlife Fund. This will be great and you can help, preserve nature." And you go, "Well, who started that?" And you go, "Well, Prince Philip and Prince Bernhard and Julian Huxley." And you go, "Oh, the head of the Eugenics Society is in charge of this." And you go, "Well, yeah." And also the guy who said that when he dies, he wants to come back as a virus so that he can destroy humanity. That guy did it. And then Prince Bernhard, the guy who has the human hunting parties on his estates and wherever, Netherlands or Belgium or wherever the fuck he's murdering people. So you just go, wait a second. This doesn't feel very environmental to me. This feels like it's a smokescreen to get people caring about the nature, which we should, and I think we do, but it feels like it gets hijacked, and then from that you come into the Club of Rome, and then you get into the United Nations, and Maurice Strong talking about, well, we have this problem with this global warming, and you go, do we really have a problem with global warming? And I don't know that the numbers show that, but it threw me a little bit because it hadn't occurred to me when I was younger that the environmental movement had been hijacked in that way. I thought they were just extremely annoying leftists who wanted to save the polar bears and would, Greenpeace and all that stuff. And you think, well, these are just do-gooders that are out there, a bunch of hippies out there trying to save the world by fighting against the machine. And then you realize, no, this is actually part of a much darker agenda. What's the relationship between the environmental movement and depopulation?
Well, I'll just say it's interesting that you bring up wrestling. Like, I'm wondering what is more fake, the WWF wrestling or the WWF panda?
Yeah, no kidding. They're going to get sued for copyright infringement on more than just the name, also the fakeness of it all. Yeah, it seems. But they sucker us in, right? They get us thinking, oh well, we have the power to save these animals, or these species are becoming extinct. Oh no, we have to step up and save them. It's tempting to want to join the fight and be on the right side of humanity, and they sucker you into it, and only to then guilt trip you into saying, well, actually, the problem is you. The problem, as the limits to growth say, the problem here is humanity, and in discovering this, we have found that humanity is the problem, and only through changed behaviors can we save humanity. So. Are they saving humanity through the environmental movement, or is this just the setup to eventually destroy humanity through it?
It's the setup. I mean, this cult is very, very cunning, and so they've become masters of propaganda. So I'd say two of the key ways that they control the world is through the control of money that we talked about at the start of this, with the private banking and all of that, and the trickery, the fraud that goes on with that, but also the control of perception. And so they've become masters at setting up narratives for us. And when I look throughout history at all the different isms and movements they created, it's quite staggering because you talked about the Round Table group that was set up by Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner, and there was a Rothschild that was part of that too at the very top of it.
Mhm.
So they had three groups. They had the Society of the Elect, which was the inner circle. Then they had, I think they called the next ring around the Society of the Inner Circle and then the Society of the Outer Circle. They had three rings within the organization. And so if the organization was composed of some 70 people, they didn't realize that the people that were in the lower part of it didn't realize there were upper circles. So they could be looking at someone else who would be part of the two inner circles and not even know that those circles existed. And so this is part of their incredible infiltration. But these that was the ruling group at the time, and they set up Germany in two world wars to basically take the hit, take the fall, because at that time, this whole cult was headquartered in Britain. I mean, in a lot of ways, it still is headquartered in the city of London, but
Yep.
at that time, Britain was the world superpower in, like, say, 1900, and they were very scared when they looked over at a rising Germany, because Germany was starting to take them on militarily and industrially, and they were like, we can't allow Germany to basically surpass us. And they were also deadly scared that Germany was going to form an alliance with Russia. And they got it in their heads for whatever reason that if Germany and Russia ever formed an alliance, they would be unstoppable. It wouldn't matter how powerful Britain was or how many alliances it had. They would not be able to stop the Russia with its land army and its control of all the resources and control of, like, the heartland, as they called it, and then Germany with its, like, technological and engineering genius. They were like, okay, this can't happen. So Britain then basically completely changed all of its foreign policy to make sure that whatever happened, there would be no alliance between Germany and Russia ever. And so then it set up secret alliances with Russia and France and encircled Germany in the First World War. But that wasn't even enough for them, because then they kind of defeated Germany, but they really wanted to crush Germany and own Germany. And so then they repeated the same thing in the Second World War, when they absolutely destroyed Germany and they occupied it, and there's US military bases in it till this day. So they're just, and they did that by setting up a lot of secret alliances and all of that. But the interesting thing to me in writing this book I'm writing now is learning that they set up deliberately an opposite ideology in Russia as in Germany, because they wanted Germany and Russia to fight. So how were they going to do that? Well, they had to get them at each other's throats. So they installed the Bolsheviks there in the Russian Revolution in 1917, which was happening during World War One, and there was a bloody civil war after that with the Reds versus the Whites in Russia. But because they pumped so much money and weapons and whatever into the Bolsheviks, they propped up Lenin and Trotsky. They made sure that those guys had control of Russia, and they were atheist and materialistic and communist. And then they fostered the Nazis in Germany, who were the opposite of that ideologically. And it took them a while, but they also pumped up Hitler and the Nazis and all this and got them into power. So then in the 1930s, they had the stage perfectly set with these two ideologies that they were eventually going to turn against each other and fight. When in other circumstances, the Russians and the Germans may have actually been natural allies and friends. So all of this was a very long plan that took decades, and it was very cunning and manipulative. It was through the control of ideology. And so this is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but a lot of the way that they rule is through ideology and control of narrative. So they'll introduce some story that, if you really look at it closely, it doesn't make any sense. Like saying that humans are the virus or the disease on the planet. That doesn't make any sense if you're a human and you're looking at yourself and you're looking at your own species. But when you follow these stories all the way to the end, they're illogical. They're made up. They're contrived. But that's, they're meant to be like that because they're designed to control people. They're designed to limit people's perception, to disempower them, to give them a smaller understanding of who they are, and ultimately to create different sides and groups that'll fight against each other.
Yeah, and I remember hearing a description of NATO in the aftermath of World War II as being the excuse to keep America in, Russia out, and Germany down. And that seems to be the theme, is we always have to keep Germany down. We see it to this day with the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline. Who did that hurt the most? Well, it's a Russian pipeline. It hurt Russia? Yeah, it hurt Russia. Who did it hurt the most? Germany. And then we're selling them oil or LNG from America. We bring the ships over and go, well, you could have got it from the pipeline, but things happen, and I guess it accidentally blew itself up, right? And now we'll sell you LNG at triple the price. So it's always been about demonizing Germany, and Germany has done a great job of cucking as well. I mean, the fact that they've paid out, God, who knows, over the last 70 years, trillions of dollars to the Israelis for compensation for this. It it sounds, it always felt like the plan had been to destroy Germany however you could. In the aftermath of World War One, we obviously saw that with the Treaty of Versailles, just annihilating them culturally, socially, financially, and then here they come on the upswing back in the 30s. They start to come get this back together, and we're putting the band back together, and we've got this very charismatic guy who's talking about all the problems that we have here in Germany, and people are looking around going, I see the problems too. I see it. This guy he's not making it up. We feel this as well. And then rallying him into this Second World War. And it makes me think of Albert Pike. It makes me think of the letters, the three world wars, and what the point of each of them is. And if that is true, that the three world wars are in some ways scheduled, maybe not exactly on a calendar, but at least, made to come into existence at some point with an outcome predetermined, that an outcome that they want set up in advance, then are we not walking into World War III right now?
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, to me, it was really sickening to see that destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines a few years ago by the US. I mean, to me, when I look at all the acts of evil in the world, I mean, that was just pure evil. I mean, yeah. All that is doing is hurting millions and millions of people, mostly Germans in winter, or whoever else is getting gas from that. And I mean, just because they don't like Germany and Russia working together, they're just going to like kill it. I mean, and then the response from Germany, there's not a single politician, not a single one that has the balls to say, hey, US, you're meant to be our ally and you just destroyed our pipeline. I mean, in one of the, like, that's an act of war. I mean, it's incredible. What an incredible like crime that was. And yeah. It's just silence. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Very sad, but yeah, there's still this mindset, this fear that's running the US and the UK. I mean, the US basically inherited the UK's kind of mindset and trickery and power and colonial tricks and the way, how to kind of assassinate leaders and instigate coups and divide and conquer. All of that the British had mastered during their time at the top was passed on to the US, and the US have been doing the same trick since. But yeah, so now we're at the stage where Israel was deliberately set up in the aftermath of World War II, which was planned. They rode the waves of anti-Semitism to get Israel to get the foot in the door there, and it's a colonial outpost. It's basically now run by Ashkenazi Jews, and if you trace them back, they are descendants of Khazaria, which is the area where modern day Ukraine is, and that's not a coincidence either with what's been happening with the Ukraine war. And so they don't have any connection to the land like the Arabs that were living there or the Semitic Jews that live there too. And so the whole thing is a scam. You've got all these Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, Eastern European Jews with totally Eastern European sounding names that suddenly get into Israel, and then they change their name to make it sound more Hebrew. Right. And they pretend that they've been living there for 3,000 years. It's a joke. It's a scam. And of course, all the countries there, including the Palestinians and the ones around it, are like, what is going on here? I mean, Bashar al-Assad, who had to, he had to leave his country in November, or he was going to get killed in that coup. But he at one point said that Israel was a knife through the heart of the Arab world. And that's what it's designed to be. They want the land for certain reasons. It probably has to do with ley lines. They're obsessed with Jerusalem and the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock and all of that. But they are also planning this thing decades or centuries in advance, because they know that, just like with the Treaty of Versailles, with its so punitive and the reparations towards Germany, they knew that Germany would have a counter reaction to that kind of injustice, Well, they also know that there's going to be a counter reaction to the injustice that Israel is perpetrating, and that kind of pushback can then be used to start a war. So
Yep.
there's all sorts of agendas that come from this. It's very deliberate. And what the point I've been trying to make for years is actually that Israel appears to be the headquarters of this cult now, even though they still have a big control over the city of London with all its gargoyles and lizards.
Mm.
They're obsessed beyond what is kind of rationally able to be explained with this piece of land. In Jerusalem and Israel, and so um, they want that land for whatever reason, and they know it's going to create wars, and they're fine with that, and they're wanting it. They want to trigger World War III in whatever way they can. And I mean, if you look at all the wars that Israel has perpetrated against its neighbors, whether it's Egypt or Syria or Lebanon. I mean, right now it just bombs everyone. I mean, it
Yeah.
just does whatever it wants. Like it sets up fake ceasefires, and that's just gives it time to regroup or maybe just score a cheap PR victory. And then even though it's have agreements with Hamas or Lebanon or whatever, it just violates them. It doesn't care. It just finds any excuse it can to continue the bombing. And it's look at the war. It's happening on all these different fronts. It's happening in Lebanon. It's happening in Syria. It's happening in Gaza itself. It's getting the US to bomb the Houthis in Yemen, and it is just itching to take on Iran.
Yeah. And we have this Greater Israel project that is no secret. They have patches on the side of the IDF uniforms showing what the plan is. And for those of us that have been understanding this, we can sort of read the tea leaves and see the direction that this is going. But I'm curious what the role of Ukraine is in this too, because as you said, it's no accident that we're involved, that there's an involvement, a war in Ukraine. It's cleaning out all the military age fighting men, an entire generation of Ukrainians. And if I allow myself to put on my tinfoil hat and extrapolate out where I could see this going, I could see them taking over, repopulating this area, this whatever is left of Ukraine. Let's say it's 80% of what it was 4 years ago, but being a central home base for a return to Khazaria, right? That this could be a second front, a European foothold. Forget the Middle East. Obviously, Israel's there already, but is this the second foothold in Europe and Central Europe here?
That's a very good question. I mean, I don't have the answer to that yet. I think it's going to become apparent in the next few years. We're going to see whether Russia will go all the way to Odessa and basically take the entire coast of the Black Sea, or whether Ukraine will be left with some of that. But there's obviously a deep connection. If you look at the list of Israeli prime ministers and presidents or people that are held very high office there, a lot of them came from Ukraine or had family from Ukraine. So yeah, and I mean, Ukraine and Israel have been helping each other. You know, there were deals where Ukraine was supplying drones to Israel or vice versa. And in fact, I think Ukraine was helping some of the HTS rebels that are funded by Turkey that threw Assad out. Ukraine was definitely helping them with like drone technology, and they were supplying men for the Ukraine war. So there was even like a deal between that group, and that group is totally beholden to Israel. I mean, right after they took power, the day they came into power, Israel just completely annihilated and destroyed Syrian's air force. It just took out all their planes,
Yeah.
and that group said nothing. It's just like when Germany had the Nord Stream pipeline bombed by the US, they said nothing. So Israel just destroys a country's entire air force, and no word, nothing.
Nothing.
So yeah, there's obviously this is just another example of these hidden connections behind the scenes, and then we have different groups on the outside, but they're just like the little finger puppets, and they all connect back to the same source.
Like Kolomoisky in Ukraine, a Ukrainian Jew who's financed Zelensky's rise to power from washed up actor to president, playing his biggest fake role ever, playing commander of the Ukrainian army with his costume, where it just feels like there's more to this story. Whenever you get the American empire enthusiastically supporting some foreign government, you have to ask why, and you can see that there's two of them that the checkbook is wide open for it's Ukraine and Israel, and they will not stop giving money to these people. And so you have to go, well, what's in it for America? What's in it for American interest? And you go, well, I start thinking, well, nothing really, but except that how do we know that this is even for American interest? Because if the American government is infiltrated by the Jews, which it clearly is, the the hardcore Zionist Jews specifically, and now all of a sudden America's enthusiastic. I understand them wanting to support Israel because that makes sense, but Ukraine as well, and then you have all these ties to Jewish people inside of Ukraine. You start to go, well, wait a second. This feels like this is a war for Israel by proxy, right? That the Ukraine versus Russia is also seems to be in some way benefiting the Zionist regime. So I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that plan is. If maybe the plan is we'll set up a foothold here in Europe and build this out as a secondary homeland for the Jews. Maybe that comes in the aftermath of World War III. Maybe World War III that we're setting up, we're going to need a new home base for them, and we're going to have to put them somewhere. And where could we put them? Oh, I don't know, maybe Ukraine. And then you go, oh, then we start to push for Ukraine. I don't know. It's tough to see exactly where this is all going. I just know that I get very nervous when I see people in positions of power that have banking ties. And it brings me to Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, World Economic Forum, deeply connected guy. I think Bilderberg's steering committee, maybe even, now being installed as the head of Canada. Any thoughts on on what direction we're going? Is he there to oversee the bankruptcy of Canada? Is he there to manage the fire sale that's going to happen? I get very nervous when I see that guy anywhere, and being installed in our neighbor to the north doesn't exactly set my mind at ease. Any ideas of what that guy's up to?
I don't, but I think it's quite unusual that they would put such an insider into that position of power. But it really seemed like one of those machines where it has like a claw. They just grabbed Carney and they went, "Okay, we're going to put you right here."
Right.
And they just engineered it. Like it was so easy for them. Like,
Yeah.
what? Democracy? Like, I mean, this guy is such an insider. Bilderberg, Bank of England. The Bank of England is one of the most powerful Rothschild central banks in the entire world. You don't get to run that bank unless you are the consummate insider.
Oh
So
yeah.
this guy, I mean, he obviously is very high up. He's going to know what the plan is. He's going to be proceeding according to his script. He'll be told what to do, just like Trump is told what to do. But I mean, it's quite possible that they could be playing out some theater on the stage so that Canada ends up becoming part of the new technate or the North American Union, because that was one of the things that Trump led off with right when he got into power, was suddenly like, yeah, we want Canada, we want Greenland, and we're going to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and Panama and blah blah blah. So that's straight out of the North American Union playbook thing that was being discussed, maybe like as much as 20 years ago. But if you go further back, you can look into the technocracy movement that Elon Musk's grandfather on his mother's side, so May Musk's father, Haldeman, he was a racist and another guy that was into apartheid and all of this stuff. And he was pushing technocracy really hard. In fact, he got arrested for it at one point by the Canadian government. But when you look at the maps in the 1930s of technocracy, they had something they called the technate, which was basically just a region. It's just like a region of the world. And they had a technate going from the top of Greenland all the way down. It covered all of Central America, and it covered the top of South America, a bit of Venezuela. And so that was their plan in the 1930s. And how interesting that now Trump has totally invited Musk in to run rampant and do whatever he wants, basically, with virtually no oversight. He's created a whole new department for him called Doge, which is also the leader of the Venetian black nobility, which is actually another strand of where this cult comes from, because the Venetian bankers were the bankers in power, and they were running the world well before the Rothschilds came on the scene, hundreds of years before that. So they had already kind of mastered that the trick of private banking. So very interesting. I mean, these things aren't coincidental, but
Oh,
anyway, Musk is just running rampant and doing whatever he wants, right? Well, Musk's grandfather, who clearly influenced him, was promoting this technocracy with the technate with Greenland, Canada, and the whole of the Americas, most of the Americas in a region. So, um, sometimes like you just have to you study history and you realize there's nothing new under the sun. These are old plans. They're just being given a new packaging, like a new product in the supermarket, but it's the same old plan for control. And wanting to kind of play off different sides to create new opportunities to carve up the world, wanting to make the world into regions and then combine those regions into a central world government. This has been the plan for a very, very long time, and we're just seeing a new iteration of it right now with Trump and Musk and Carney.
yeah. And now we get to hear about the Panama Canal that we never really thought of too much. And then, oh, well, it's part of that too. As you mentioned, the Gulf of America. Yeah, this is interesting. Um, there's a lot happening and it's right in front of our eyes. And for those of us with the eyes to see it, it's a fascinating